My wife and children have been away for several weeks, and I don't miss them. My 28 male wife, Fiona, 26 female, went away to visit her family in another part of the country for a few weeks. They were having a camping trip, and since I recently started working a new job and also didn't want to be around my in-laws for that long, I stayed behind. She took our 2 daughters, ages 2 and 6 months, with her. She called today to talk and also to tell me that she misses me. And I suddenly realized that I hadn't missed her or the children at all. Shoot, I hadn't even really thought about them. For all I could have known or cared, I was back to my free and single self, making my own food, doing my own household chores, having free time to do whatever I pleased. I went out of my way to reconnect with old friends I hadn't seen in years, and it was amazing. I felt so free, and the whole time, I didn't once think about how my wife was doing out there, how my oldest daughter might be missing me, or anything. I didn't know, or want to know, anything about their lives at that point. My youngest daughter started eating solid food while she was out there, and started sitting up on her own. It doesn't bother me in the slightest that I missed those first moments with her. I know this sounds awful, but I have no concern whatsoever about them all. I feel like I could do this forever, be alone, play video games, use substances, responsibly, hang out with whoever I want, do whatever I want whenever I want. I don't feel lonely, isolated, heartsick, sad, depressed, purposeless, suppressed, or anything of the sort. I almost don't want these weeks to end. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to leave my family. I know that my children need a father figure, and I want to do my best to provide for them and do all the things a father is supposed to do for his children. And I know I'm a bad parent, and I'll never be the father they should have had. That doesn't mean I won't continue to try and do my best for them, but, darn, if it doesn't feel amazing to just be free and single for a few weeks.
Was sobbing uncontrollably. He's apologizing to me and told me he likes me and didn't use me to move on. This whole revelation didn't make me think that I was being used. I felt his pain, and I felt his love for his family. I asked him why he cheated, and he said he was drunk and didn't even know it happened. After that night, he's still the same, but I am not. I feel like I am in the way. Meredith is still single. She mentioned that she wanted to focus on raising Ian and pursuing her law studies. I love Danny, but I cannot compete with Meredith. Should I break up with him and help him get back together with Meredith? Update: I only shared the information I knew during that time and decided to meet with Mare, now named Mary, and ask her side of the story. I also told her beforehand what the meeting was all about so as not to shock her and make her uncomfortable on the spot. She agreed to it, and we met at her house. Danny knows nothing about it. I told her why I was curious about it and what Danny told me. Everything. Mary looked sad, but she told me that as much as she wants a complete family for Ian, she could no longer see herself being with Danny. That the best they can do for Ian is the parenting setup they have now, which is working for all of them. She said that at the time her mom died, Danny wanted to come, but he needed a visa and it would take time, and the funeral was all scheduled, and the processing of Danny's visa would delay her from seeing her mom one last time. She then told me before she went home, she confronted the woman first, and she told her that they were both drunk and she didn't know she was filming, but it's kind of odd since the camera was positioned in a way that everything could be seen and steady. She didn't press her further, but she did hit her, and I won't go into details of the altercation. Danny did try to win her back and explained it to her over and over again, but all she could think of was the sight of him in bed, all exposed with another woman while she's grieving and forcing herself to be sane for Ian. She showed me the video, and it only lasted for 37 seconds. Their friend was on top of Danny, moving, and you can hear moans and rumbling. It never occurred to her that he was SA'd since first, he never mentioned his friends would come over while she's out of the country, and second, Danny didn't even point it out to her. All he said was he was drunk and didn't even know it happened until Mary showed him the video. If, and ever, Danny was SA'd, and he really felt like he was, Mary is willing to help him in any way she can, but the situation between their family will stay as is. She just lately found out that Danny cut out all of his friends completely when their divorce was finalized, but she didn't ask why and also tried not to engage with them as much as possible. Now we both think that it has something to do with what happened that night and there is more to it than what Danny has told us. She said she's moved on and maybe Danny, too, and they just wanted to be there completely for Ian while he's growing up, and there's no sense for them to go back to that time and try to change the outcome of their decisions when everything turned out fine. She told me that Danny introducing me to her and Ian just means he loves me and is really moving forward and doesn't mean something else. She said that their relationship was far from perfect, but they managed to get as far as bringing Ian into this world because they worked things out the best they could. They sure had problems financially, emotionally, or as petty as Danny not putting his socks in laundry baskets or her not getting ready on time, but Danny cheating was something she didn't see coming. She didn't know how to react or confront the situation aside from ending it right there and then. She asked me if she can talk to Danny in private because Danny might still be thinking that she hates him and still living with the guilt of hurting her in the worst way possible. Maybe all they need is good closure. Complete forgiveness. She assured me that Danny is a good man, and what happened to their relationship should not define Danny for who he is, and it was a phase in their lives that should be left in the past where it really belongs. She said that it was her own choice to stay single to focus on raising Ian and doesn't mean she's still stuck with her feelings for Danny like what most people perceive it. I asked her if it's a good idea to suggest therapy to Danny, and she told me she'll give anything she can do to help if Danny agrees to it, and also told me not to force the idea if Danny says no the first time I ask. We both concluded that Danny is bottling something inside him that none of us knew. Regarding their mutual friend, she jokingly said that Beth got away with murder, referring to what she did to them. She said that the last news she had of her was the mutual friend was no longer in town, and she couldn't care less about her whereabouts. It was wrong of me to think that they should be back together, not considering Mary's pain and the things she needed to do to heal. I apologized to her for making her relive this painful memory, but she told me that it's a small price to pay if it means someone else's peace of mind. You might be weirded out by my decision to stay with Danny, but Mary is right. What happened to them was painful, but there's nothing I or they can do about it now, and Danny is working on himself. I never once doubted his sincerity with me. If all else fails, then the joke's on me. But I love the guy enough to give our relationship a try. I will try to talk to him and help him heal too. I agree that I should not compare myself with her. She is indeed an amazing woman we all aspire to be and deserves the best life has to offer for her and Ian. Thank you to this community. I really appreciate all of you. I just found out my fiancé has been doing horrifying things to me. My fiancé and I have been together for almost 3 years. While we've had our fair share of problems, we've never had issues to this extent. To give some context, I'm the sole breadwinner. I work from home, but my fiancé takes care of our baby while I do so. My fiancé does not drink alcohol, and this was due to a previous situation where he lost control and wrecked my apartment, but I do drink. He stopped drinking on his own accord, and has never acted like that since. I like to have some beers after work, and especially on the weekends. I ended up starting to drink something stronger in place of beer, which I now know is really foolish, just because of my stressful days. I'm a software engineer. When I started this, on the weekends, I would get too drunk. Almost always. I take full blame for that, but every Friday night, without fail, I'd end up too drunk, partaking in some recreational activities, and off to bed I went. I was never ill or anything, but just a bit too much for me. And so I'd just go to bed. This is why I blame myself. After a few weeks of switching to something stronger, I'd wake up, not hungover or anything, just a normal wake up, and my fiancé would ask me crude questions, jokingly, like how are you feeling today? The first time he asked me this, I laughed and went you are not serious, and he laughed too. Then we'd go about our day. But this happened quite a few times after. He'd always ask the morning after, posing strange questions. Always weird, but I chalked it up to him just being a bit sour that I was drinking since he does not. Eventually, the question became, do you remember us being together last night? And again, he said it jokingly. I never realized he was actually serious. This has happened maybe 20 times now. We have been having issues with our baby's sleep schedule. We take turns, as of lately, to get up with the baby when she wakes up early. She usually wakes up between 4 a.m. to 6 a.m., and it's been killing us. I stopped drinking the stronger stuff a few months ago because of the awful hangovers and me being sound asleep. I have since switched back to beer and lighter beverages. Well, today was his day to wake up with a baby. I had 3 lighter beverages last night, over the course of maybe 4 hours, but I wasn't drunk. So, he did wake up with her, and a few hours later, still before I needed to be up for work, he comes to lay her back down for a nap. I briefly woke up and acknowledged them. She sleeps in our room, and went back to sleep. The next thing I know, our room, which is pitch black due to our curtains, is lighting up sporadically. I see it under my eyelids. Eventually, my eyes shoot open, and I realize that my fiancé is in bed with me, just laying the opposite way. I figured he was taking a nap too, maybe on his phone, so I repositioned and got comfy. But then the flashes of light continued. After a minute, I realized, while I was laying on my side, in a nightgown, with my legs spread a bit, that he was laying on the opposite end of the bed, under the covers, taking pictures of me inappropriately. When I realized this, I kind of froze. I thought maybe he was doing it as a joke. So I held still, and waited. But he kept going. Then I felt him behaving inappropriately in bed next to me a moment later. The flash must have gone off a good 15 times. To give a bit more context, I have never once known this man to engage in self-gratification. Ever. Never once. Never before a romantic encounter, nothing. And I know what you're all thinking, but no, he doesn't do it in private. He doesn't. I always thought it was a bit strange, but whatever. Finally, he got up, left, and a little while later I woke up and went downstairs to say hi. After a few minutes, he goes, "How are you feeling?" And I couldn't help it, but my laugh was really nervous. I'm assuming he caught on to that and goes, "You know I was thinking about you, right? Because you wouldn't be with me last night?" I truly didn't know how to respond. After a few seconds, I just kind of laughed and went, "No way," but he was serious. He then hid his phone for a second, I'm assuming deleted some photos, then showed me the pictures he took of me while I was sleeping. I was shocked. I didn't know how he'd react if I just started outright calling him inappropriate, so I told him that I looked gross, and to delete them. He wouldn't. So now here I am. I had to call out of work today because I feel physically sick. All those times he told me he had been with me, I do not remember. I was already asleep. And like I mentioned, I thought he was kidding. But once I started piecing things together, like evidence of a romantic encounter being in the bed, things like that confirmed he did indeed do those things to me while I was passed out. I'm starting to think the only reason he's been honest about it is that he thinks I might remember. The only time I ever have was this morning, which scares me even more, but here I am. I know what I need to do, but I don't at the same time. I'm sick. I feel gross. I feel weird. I feel used. I didn't want to think of this as assault. Heck, I still don't. But at the same time, I had no idea this was even happening. I'm very angry, not necessarily with him, but at myself for letting this happen. What about my daughter? What in the world? I'm terrified for her. He's taking a nap now. I don't know how to get him out of my house without calling the authorities. So I guess that's exactly what I need. I refuse to submit to my boyfriend. I, 26 female, refuse to submit to my boyfriend, 28 male. This has led to a lot of discord amongst both of our families, and they are telling me to endure it and be the woman he needs me to be. Right now, I'm staying with my sister while we figure things out. This all began the other day when my boyfriend and I got into an argument over splitting chores in the house. I had gotten home from work and came back to a dirty home. There were water bottles and trash on the floor, along with milk still being out for however long and dirty dishes in the sink. To say the house was a mess would be an understatement. It was my boyfriend's day off today, but I had to work, so he was home alone. I work in the ER and often have to do 12 to 16-hour shifts. He works in a warehouse and has a 40-hour work week, which I understand can be demanding, which is why I do what I do for him in the first place. Still, I manage to cook, clean, and pack food for both him and me, all while he does the bare minimum, like taking out the trash or making sure he doesn't leave toothpaste on the bathroom sink. On this particular day, I had a rough day at work and was hoping to come home to a clean house, shower, and get some rest. It was my Friday and I was finally getting paid. I just wanted to relax, but unfortunately, when I came back home, the house was a mess, and he had a guest a few hours prior. Without my knowledge, I found him in the room bundled up like a sleeping, peaceful baby. I was furious. I didn't even say anything to him. I simply showered and slept in our guest bedroom. I was awoken a few hours later by him yelling at me, saying how lazy I was for just coming home and going to sleep. I yelled at him back, saying, "If you wanted the house to be clean, you should have gotten up and cleaned up your own mess, yourself. I am not your maid, nor am I your mother." He yelled back at me, saying that it was my duty as the woman of the house to keep it clean and that he wished I was like his mom because she did her job. When he said that, a switch in my head just flipped. I argued back, saying that if he wanted me to be like his mom, then he should be like his dad and be a better provider, and I would quit my job. He said that he was the man of the house and whatever he says, goes. I don't remember entirely what I told him but said something along the lines of, "No, you aren't the man of the house. I am. I go to work, pay most of the bills, clean the house, cook almost every meal you eat, all while being pregnant. You can't even comprehend how exhausted I am. I am tired of you doing nothing but coming home from work, eating, and sleeping. You don't help me at all. A man is supposed to lead, but I always have to take the initiative in this relationship, and I'm tired of it. We're not even married, and you're expecting me to step into the wifely role while you act like a kid. He said, "See, this is why I haven't asked you to marry me." My heart dropped into my stomach. I told him that if he was never planning to marry me anyways, that we should go our separate ways and for him to stop wasting my time. I packed up and left, deactivated the tracking system I have in my car and phone, and have since blocked him. I'm so hurt. I have invested so much of my time, money, and life into this man, and I received nothing in return. As much as I want a baby, I don't want one that badly. I was set on leaving him until his mom called me last night and said I was stepping out of line as his woman and that I should have just cleaned up, and that it wasn't that hard for me to do. This all could have been avoided if I decided to be the bigger person and clean up after him. That it is God's word that I, as a woman, should submit to her man. I am now second-guessing my decision in terminating my pregnancy and ending my relationship over something so small like cleaning, but I know that no matter what, it won't be enough for him, and that I most likely will not get the ring I deserve. I know that there is someone out there who wants to give me the world, not this little corner of California that he has to offer me, but I do love him. Growing up without either parent in my life, if I decided to keep my baby, I want my child to have both parents in their life. What should I do, Reddit?
Today I messed up by accidentally giving a date DMT. I brought a Tinder date home last night. It was the first time we met, everything was pretty normal, and we went back to my place and had a good time. We both had to work and weren't really expecting to share the night, the bottom line being that she wasn't prepared to stay over. She asked me if I had any Zaza she could smoke before she headed out. I, from the bathroom around the corner, said, "Yeah, there's a pen in the drawer beside the bed. There are 2 pens in that drawer." I rarely ever use the DMT pen, so I momentarily forgot. Both look like Zaza pens except one is a 5 Mayu DMT pen. When the light bulb went off, I shouted, "Wait, make sure it's the black pen." I'm shouting this while turning the corner. By the time I get in the room, she had the pen blinking, maxed out, and let out a very loose, "What the?" For context, I take half of that to break through. She started pushing herself up against the wall like a scared baby deer. I was like, "Oh, no, this is not good," but it's kind of quick, so I'm thinking, okay, 10 minutes and some big feelings, she'll be fine. For the next couple of minutes, she laid limp on the bed like a rag doll with intense, wide open eyes. Then, for the next couple of minutes, she, while exposed, for the record, started screaming, "I am the portal." In the following couple of minutes, she was coming down and seemed confused, and then she broke into a huge crying fit. I'm thinking, okay, the trip's over, now comfort, explain, damage control. I told her she was okay now, everything was okay, and that she used a DMT pen, not my Zaza pen. She cut me off with, "I am God, this really spooked me, not gonna lie," and booked it downstairs. I didn't know what to do, so I just started shouting, "Stop, please wait," while she ran outside, still exposed. I have lots of neighbors, nosy ones, and I'm chasing an exposed woman, asking her to stop. Not a good look. Eventually, she got winded and laid on the grass, stared up, and chanted nonsense. I was on the phone with paramedics at this point, and no surprise, the cops were pulling up. I was worried, and I told the exact truth. I live in Canada, where these substances don't mean big legal trouble. The girl had a psychotic episode that was DMT-induced, obviously. Apparently, she came to her senses hours later but is still suffering some mental confusion. My neighbors probably think I'm a criminal now. I was forced to betray my best friends and destroy their reputations. When I found out what they planned to do, I knew they weren't my friends anymore. I made sure they would never try something like that again. Growing up, I was a bad kid. I didn't care about anyone but my friends. Jay, Daniel, and Bruce. We used to steal from stores and family, swear and throw things at random people walking down the street, and we were smoking from the age of 12. They were my real family. Or so I thought. When I was 16, my parents had finally had enough of my behavior and I was sent to a school for troubled youth. It was more of a military institution that taught discipline in the most brutally effective ways you can imagine. And it worked. By the end of my second summer, I was a different kid. These people taught me that real men simply don't act the way I did and that the path I was headed down would lead me to jail or to my grave. When I came home, I was accepted back with open arms by Jay, Daniel, and Bruce. At the same time, I was determined to prove to my parents I wasn't the same screw-up. So I followed their rules and thus only really talked to my friends during school and football. One day after practice, I came into the locker room to see my 3 friends alone, chatting and laughing. I joined in on the conversation and it was going fine until my friend mentioned a college party they were planning to crash. They were saying they've been doing it for a while and it was great because of the easy girls and booze. I was hesitant about it because I didn't think my mom and dad would agree to let me go. But then Jay started talking about this girl from our school he was planning on inviting. He started to tell both my other friends and me that he'd been trying to get her into bed for a while, and she kept making excuses. So he planned on bringing her to the party and doing it with her there. When I asked him, in a joking way, "What makes you so sure she won't reject you again?" he looked me dead in the eye and said, "In all seriousness, I'm just going to slip something in her drink. It'll loosen her up, no problem." At first I just kind of awkwardly laughed, thinking it was some kind of messed up joke. But they weren't laughing with me when I asked him if he was serious. He told me he was sick of her games and knew she was just stringing him along. It will make things easier. I couldn't believe my ears. I felt ill. I excused myself from the conversation pretty quickly and practically bolted home. I spent the whole night convincing myself my friends were just messing around. A few days later, during yet another after-school training session, we all ended up last in the locker room. Jay did something I never would have expected in 1,000 years. All three of them had been talking about the party this whole time. When Jay began rummaging through his gym bag, he said, "Look at this," and tossed Daniel a bag with small pink capsules inside. Immediately I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't stop thinking, oh my god, this is real. They weren't joking. It's hard to describe how I felt in the moment when Jay began describing in detail what he planned to do. I was sick. I couldn't take it. And again, I ran off. I actually did end up puking later that night, going over and over in my head what the hell I had just witnessed. I almost couldn't believe it. These three boys have been my friends for 15 years. I thought of them as my own family. I thought I knew them better than anyone. But 1 year away in this, I actually broke down crying that night. I'm not ashamed to admit it. What I am ashamed of is how long it took to actually get a grip and handle it. I knew I should have told someone, but in some messed up way, my loyalties were still screwed. Don't crucify me for it. I know now what I should have done. But I was 17, and these were my best friends. I didn't want them to get into trouble, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't let this go down. So instead of reporting all I heard to an adult, like anyone else would have, I decided I'd sort it out all on my own. I went to Jay and told him not to do what he had planned. I told him it was stupid and dangerous and would ruin both his life and the life of the girl. He got right in my face and told me that the school I got sent to had turned me into a coward. Then he said something I'll never forget. He told me word for word, "I'm doing her a favor. I'm going to show her what being with a real man is like. After this, all she'll want to do is thank me for saving her." I saw red. Without thinking, I punched him straight in the nose. We fought for a bit and ended up getting suspended for fighting. I couldn't believe it. I was seething. My best friend had just told me he was going to victimize an innocent girl at a party, and I was a coward for not wanting to join in. I was disgusted and sickened to my core. Most of all, I was done with him. My parents were disappointed I had gotten suspended so shortly after coming home, but I just sat quietly while my mom cried and my dad screamed at me. I know I should have told them then and there, but I still had this insane notion in my head that I had to get them back on my own. After a weekend of being grounded, I went back to school and the first thing I did was seek out Jay. Daniel and Bruce were standing with him. I forced myself into doing something that disgusted me then and still disgusts me now. I apologized to him. I told him I was sorry I hit him and that he was right. I had changed, and I hated what that school had done to me. I lied and said, I want to go back to the way things were before. They ate that crap up right away. Jay and I even hugged it out, and I put the cherry on top when I told them I'd be coming to the party. My first course of action was recording them whenever we were alone. I wanted to get everything they said about the party and the girl they were planning on victimizing on tape. I knew I needed some kind of proof, or it would just be my word against theirs. After a few days, I had more than enough to end things there and then. I wasn't done there though. Sometime during the following week, I tracked down the girl. Took her aside and told her everything. Understandably, she was furious and scared. But I begged her not to go to the police or tell anyone. I know now that was stupid as well. But for some reason, she listened to me. I had a plan, a crazy, stupid plan to teach them all a lesson. I told her to tell Jay that she was going to meet him at the party, but to just stay home. Later that day, Jay started bragging about how the girl had accepted his invitation and everything was going to plan. I sat there 4.5 out my pocket, recording all of it. The night of the party rolled around and I snuck out since I was still grounded. I arrived at the party and as the night went on, Jay became more and more frustrated that the girl hadn't shown up. I made sure to keep an eye on him the whole time, just to be sure he wouldn't just pick a random victim since she hadn't come. Matter of fact, I was keeping tabs on each and every one of them, watching as they drank and drank while I stayed as level-headed as possible with some water and a beer can. When midnight came, all three of them were plastered. It was my time to shine while they were all occupied with a drinking game. I hunted down Jay's bag and took out the capsules. I'm not proud of what I did next. I slipped one into each of their drinks and I waited. It didn't take long before all three were passed out on the floor. I then took out a black permanent marker pen from my bag and wrote exactly what they were on all three of their foreheads. I'm not going to say exactly what I wrote, but it starts with an R. I took pictures and immediately uploaded them to our school's Facebook page. I knew they would be taken down, but by that point it was too late. It was a small town and word got around fast. When I got home, I got yelled at by my parents for sneaking out, but they stopped when I finally told them what had been happening. They were both shocked and didn't believe me at first until I showed them the recordings. They sat in silent horror as they listened to Jay and the others. I was silent in the car as my dad drove me to the police station, receiving a lecture about how I should have just come to him in the first place. And what I'd done at the party wasn't necessary. My phone had already blown up with other students commenting on the pictures I put on the Facebook page. As expected, the recordings were enough to get them all charged and arrested. I likely would have been arrested too, had the girl not told the court that I warned her not to go. I was charged for my use of an illegal substance since I admitted to using the substance on my 3 ex-friends. But luckily I never got jail time. I did end up with a bit of community service, though. All 3 of them were tried as adults in a case of attempted assault, but only Jay got actual jail time since he was the one who got the capsules and was the only one who admitted to wanting to use them. The other 2 only got probation and community service for being accessories, but were completely shunned in our town. No one ever let them forget. Have you ever been asked out as a joke? How did you handle it? This story takes us back about 4 years ago, to a teen event I attended every other week. I'd found this clever way to make some extra pocket money. I would buy soda, cookies, donuts, and other candies, and then sell them to the kids at the event at a markup. I was taking home $50 profit each night. For a 15-year-old who wasn't working, that was a big deal. One night, I was sitting at a table adjacent to a computer room, just taking a break. That's when I saw it coming. 3 kids started laughing and hid behind a door, and then I spotted a camera peeking out, pointed directly at me. I had no clue what they were up to, but my gut told me it wasn't going to be good. People started to stare at me, and tension was building. Right then, a girl approached me. But I still had candy left, so I casually asked her if she wanted to buy some. I'd seen her earlier, kissing a guy who was clearly her boyfriend, and the same guy was now hiding behind the door. When she asked me out, I knew instantly what was happening. You see, back then, I was overweight and struggling with some personal health issues. I figured they were trying to play a cruel prank, trying to break the fat kid's heart. But I decided to turn the tables on her. I don't remember my exact words, but I basically rejected her, heavily implying that she wasn't attractive, but never outright saying it. I played it cool and acted sincere, even though I knew it was a prank. After I rejected her, she walked straight to the kids behind the door, who jumped out, laughing like hyenas. However, instead of laughing at me, they were laughing at her. It was a triumphant moment, and I couldn't help but find the whole situation hilarious. I never really understood what they hoped to gain from this prank. Maybe they thought they could trick me into giving them free candy. Whatever it was, their plan backfired, and they didn't get the reaction they were looking for. Fast forward a few months, and the same girl was up to more outrageous behavior. She had moved on from pranks to showing off her bazookas in front of a line of guys. It seemed asking people out as a joke just wasn't enough for her anymore. What's the worst experience you've had with a roommate? I let my boss crash at my second apartment about 15 years ago. It was a low-end timeshare call center where everyone did substances, and we were pretty much everyman types, so he and I were more friends than coworkers. Anyway, he loses his apartment and asks to stay with me for a couple of months while he gets back on his feet, and I agree. He's a great dude. Kind, smart, funny, confident, and a solid 350 pounds. I only mention the weight because it's relevant to the negative experience. So, around a month into staying with us, he decides to get clean from his crippling opioid addiction. He's decided to go cold turkey from a 20 a day, 10 milligrams hydrocodone habit, which, for the uninitiated, is pretty intense. I advised rehab, but he elected to lie on the couch in my living room for weeks, costing him his job, sweating profusely and shaking under a blanket. The reason why his size was relevant: he sweat a lot already and had to take pains to reduce his body odor on normal days, with varying degrees of success. But with the withdrawals and being mostly sedentary on that cloth couch for weeks, the apartment started to smell very unpleasant. It was a party house with a revolving door, and people just kind of stopped coming during his time there. Even with my bedroom door closed down the hall, the stench was awful. It wasn't his fault. I liked the man, and he was trying to better himself and his life, so I put up with it. And he succeeded. He got himself a new place in the agreed time frame, stayed clean, and everything was hunky-dory. After he moved out, my actual roommate and I carried the couch to the parking lot dumpster, and it took several days to air out the smell. We even did a thermal fog with an oil-based cherry-scented counteractant, and it still didn't help. Kind of irrelevant, but we stayed in touch for a while back when I still had Facebook, and he got his life together. Got a good job as a realtor, lost a lot of weight, had a baby girl, found religion or whatever. Then, after a few years of being off Facebook and radio silence, I get a call from my old roommate saying that he'd relapsed and died from an OD. It was pretty devastating. Rest in peace, Don.